I've learned this term from the motorcycle community, where spec sheet nerds are dragged far harder than they are in the car community, but today I think it's time to start introducing this term to everyone, and I mean everyone, be it car lovers, computer lovers, watch lovers, sofa lovers. It doesn't matter what hobby it is, there are too many of y'all spec sheet nerds polluting the internet these days, so here are 4 spec sheet nerd arguments I'm tired of hearing. You should be willing to spend more on the Enthusiast Trim / item. That's what a true enthusiast does. It's willing to spend more for their hobby. AKA things like buy a Ferrari, it's better than a Corvette, or get the Civic Type R, it's gonna be infinitely better than like a GTI or like a base model Civic, so those cars are just pointless. I find a disgusting amount of comments from people who unironically think like this. Whether it's tech videos, motorcycle videos, computer videos, obviously car videos, and even watch videos, where people say stuff like, why buy Seiko when you can buy a Rolex? Why buy a Suzuki when you can get a Ducati? Why buy a 3-year-old phone when you can just get the newest one? Money. Money's the reason why. Then when you tell these brain-dead morons that's the reason, they shoot back things like, you're not a real enthusiast then. A real enthusiast is willing to commit to the extra price for that performance. And here's the worst part is when a new item comes out the next year, they then tell you need to immediately change the new item as well. I'm no stranger to the concept of gatekeeping, but even I'm not so callous or dissonant to say that spending more is a requirement to be part of a hobby. My favorite video that I've made to this day is 8 Stages of Car Enthusiasm. In that entire video, I never stated once that you needed to own a more expensive car with more expensive mods to be considered a respected car enthusiast or veteran in the community. What defines your initial stages of enthusiasm is simply love for that hobby. It's that simple. You like cars? Congratulations. You're a car enthusiast. I don't care about the price tag of whatever car you like or whatever car you currently have. There's a reason a ton of car enthusiasts keep old beater cars or just buy a grocery getter. So even if you don't own a super expensive Ferrari, I know a lot of people who have one sports car and one grocery getter, because one car they just use to take off miles off of the other main fun car that they use that admittedly might not always be running or might not always be in the greatest condition, or sometimes they just don't want to appreciate it super quickly or put unnecessary miles on it. Because in the case of my Z06, something I finally learned is like, first off, tires are way too expensive for it. Secondly, it keeps bending wheels, not anymore since I got actual real wheels, but still, it got frustrating because it costs anywhere from $1,800 to $2,400 to buy tires for it. And that just kind of annoys you when you're constantly spending time to do that work yourself. Even if you do pay someone else to do it, even if you do have the money to do it, it doesn't change the fact that you still have to take time out of the day, schedule it, and blah blah blah, you get the point. It just made more sense. Just get a different vehicle that was astronomically cheaper and has astronomically easier maintenance intervals and doesn't nearly have the cost expenditure that your main vehicle has, while also doing something different. I have someone who's been a car YouTuber for over 5 years. Finally admitting to not wanting to buy a supercar is basically a death sentence in terms of relevancy. So if you are a newer viewer or a long-time viewer, thanks for finding this video. I appreciate you guys sticking around, and if you aren't subscribed yet, please subscribe. And just leave a like, because again, I'm seriously gonna need it. Like, we're bleeding out here, man. Anyways, back to the topic of this video. Obviously, things like Type Rs are gonna be faster than the SI model. Things like Ferraris are gonna be faster than a base model Corvette. But it doesn't mean that cars like the SI shouldn't exist. It doesn't mean lower trims shouldn't exist. Just because those aren't quote-unquote enthusiast vehicles doesn't mean you're not a real enthusiast when you buy those non-car enthusiast trims. In all truth and honesty, there's no such thing as a true car enthusiast trim. If you mod any car enough, you can turn it into a car enthusiast car. Heck, speed alone isn't even what determines a car enthusiast car. It can be an old classic car, or just a low horsepower car that's really good at handling, which brings us to the next topic. Slow sports cars aren't real sports cars. So I've made a whole video about this topic before, so I'm gonna keep this entry kind of brief. Despite 90% of spec sheet warriors not even owning a car, let alone not even leaving their house and touching grass because they're constantly on the internet reading specs, a lot of them find the very presence of low horsepower sports cars as a direct insult to their entire existence, because their egos are truly that fragile. They're so obsessed with specs that they generally cannot compute why these things exist. They've been brainwashed by corporations so deeply ingrained by their school to worship numbers on paper. In truth, it's actually kind of tragic to the point that I don't even want to blame the spec sheet nerd entirely. Yeah, they're still a little bit stupid, but I'm gonna humanize them to the extent of it's not just them. You know, it's fun to always make fun of them, but honestly, I'd rather also show them our perspective. Straight line speed is not everything. What's the point of a car that hits 100 miles an hour in the first 2 gears when I can't even use that speed in 90% of daily driving situations? I'd rather bum around town going half that speed rolling through all of my gears than to be stuck with a supercar in traffic. I once read a long time ago on a Top Gear forum where someone said Ferraris in New York are like a cheetah in a cage, and now I finally understand what that saying meant as someone who's owned a Z06 trapped in Atlanta traffic. In Indiana, I loved my Z06, and it felt like I really got a lot more. Honestly, these days though, it's not that I'm saying fast cars are pointless. And remember, I do own a, I guess, fast, not by other YouTuber standards, I still have a slow car, but realistically speaking, 756 wheel horsepower, which is like 800-ish horsepower to the crank, it's not a slow car by any stretch of the imagination. And I've lived with it, I've had experiences with it, so it's not coming from a place of hatred or jealousy, or even being jaded either. It's not that I'm jaded, it's just genuinely, I guess, you just want something different sometimes. That's part of the reason why I'm at least still glad that I got a car that gets decent gas mileage and has a giant trunk, because I can still go on calm commutes, buy groceries, or go on cross-country drives, which makes me still see it as more than just a toy. But if it were just a toy, and heck, even now it still has moments where it feels like a toy, it is a bit lame, as weird as it sounds, because like I said, I'd rather be in a slower vehicle and use all of its potential than be in a faster vehicle and only use some of its potential. Ever since rebuilding my Mustang and getting it fixed a year ago, and also just owning stupid slow vehicles like the Honda Super Cub, it made me realize how fun slower vehicles are. You can just roll through all their gears, go through traffic, and it's hilarious because you feel like you're having a ton of fun doing the simplest of tasks. Going grocery shopping actually becomes exciting because you can actually fully appreciate a vehicle for all that it's worth, something that I could not do with the Z06 in most day-to-day circumstances in a heavily crowded city. The third thing that spec sheet nerds say that is really stupid is that they tell you to skip over slower cars and to just start with a faster car. This concept is referred to as future-proofing is what I'm going to compare it to. So before this sounds like a copy of the first entry, understand that this one isn't focused on specs and correlation to money, and more so focuses on the concept of wasting time and instead saving time. Like, hey man, why waste your time and stress yourself over getting a slower vehicle that you're just going to sell anyways when you can start on the faster one that you're actually going to keep for life because that's your dream vehicle. I've heard this in the motorcycle community as well with the 600 over 300 starter bike argument, but it's also been applied to many cases with cars. And I'll be honest with you, this is the biggest BS I've heard, and while it applies true for some people, for most, especially modern consumers, it does not apply. People these days tend to overbuy because they use the excuse of future-proofing, like, that's the one I'm actually going to keep, so let's just skip to it instead of wasting the money on a cheaper vehicle before it that I'll end up trading in within a few years to get my dream vehicle. Let's just buy my dream vehicle right away. Let's be honest with me, and I really do mean this. Even aside from wasting money and time, we're still ignoring the massive elephant in the room. What's the point of overbuying if it not only outperforms your needs, but also your limits? Most people these days, thanks to 29% APR loans and having more clout than brains, are buying cars way beyond their capabilities as the first performance car. So tying this back into cars, there are people who are like, and I actually unironically get people who talk to me about this at car meets, hey, I really don't want to buy a Scat Pack, or hey, I really don't even want to buy an RT Challenger. I'm just gonna get rid of those anyways after a year or two. I want the Hellcat right now. These people crash their cars all the freaking time. Sports cars are on a rise for how many fatal crashes they're getting over the past decade. Let's not at all gloss over the fact of how many compilations we see of sports car owners and supercar owners crashing. And usually people like to laugh at like, oh, it's rich people wasting money. Most of those people these days aren't even rich. They're middle class people or even lower income people who got baited, upsold, or had their egos played with by salesmen into buying something they didn't need or pressured into thinking that they actually needed it. If you don't have the skill to keep it on the road, that's your primary reason to not believe this bullcrap of skipping over cars, because unlike computers where it's more benign, you overbuy for a computer. If the most graphically intensive program you run on your $4,000 computer is Microsoft Paint, even though that $4,000 is still a total waste of money that you spent on the computer because you're never actually using it, doesn't change the fact that at least you're not dying because of it. I'd hope not. With cars, unfortunately, not only do the drivers get hurt, people around them could get hurt because of their stupid decisions to buy something that they couldn't actually handle. And this brings us to the final entry, which is buying more than you need in case you'll need it. Because this is a stupid phrase a lot of salesmen use that absolutely caused this type of mindset amongst modern culture, especially in terms of spec sheet nerd culture. I know a lot of people who use this saying, it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. I actually do not hate that saying, but with all due respect, a lot of people who use that saying don't even actually know the root of that saying. That saying applies to survival only items. It literally has the word need in it. It's okay to hoard more food, even if you don't need it at that instant, because you might need it later. It's okay to buy more clothing or spend a decent amount on shelter than you actually need, because again, you might need it later, and those are actual necessities. However, this does not apply to joy or recreational items. You genuinely do not need them. You genuinely do not need to even have them. It doesn't preserve your life like the aforementioned items do. So back to the computer building story. My friend was just looking for something to get him through college, allow him to play some games and do schoolwork. He told me exactly what types of games he plays and what games he intends to play in the future. This man has never modded any video game. He doesn't run any servers. He's not a content creator, doesn't edit videos, no Blender, no 3D modeling, none of that. He just wanted a work computer for some schoolwork and could do a little bit something extra from here and there. I'm so glad that he had the self-control to walk away when he almost got upsold. He went to his local computer store. He told them what he needed a computer for. He told them he had a budget of $1,200. And even then, those mother truckers still had the audacity to walk him to the high-end computers. And when he told them his budget, they said, "That's fine. You've got $1,200 now. We understand that. So you can spend the $1,200 now, use it as a down payment on this one here, and go sign up for an in-store credit card and pay the other $2,600 over 12 months, no interest." Now, a lot of people unfortunately react to this very poorly. They actually go, "Whoa, no interest? Then why not? You know, why shouldn't I do it? I can come into the store, spend $1,200, and get a way better item than I intended." Completely not realizing that they still got played. You still got oversold on a $3,800 item. Just because on that particular day only $1,200 leaves your bank account doesn't mean you spent your actual budget. They're now gonna reach into your pockets each month and siphon your money like vampires bleeding thralls. When he called me, he told me the specs of the computer they were trying to sell him, and I just said, "Look dude, you don't need that. I don't care what they told you, but all the extra capabilities of that computer genuinely will not be used by you, so it's an actual waste of money." And I didn't mean that to insult his ego, like, "Oh, you're not capable of using that," because sometimes when I tell people that, they take it and they think it's like a challenge, like, "Ooh, I'll prove you wrong, I'm gonna buy it after all," which I think is the most like 14-year-old way of thinking. So thankfully he's mature, so he understood it, because it wasn't me criticizing his inability to have extra needs. He himself set those needs. As we talked about earlier, know your limit, know your actual needs, and don't get scammed. So he literally has no need for the $3,800 super high-end PC that they were trying to sell him on, when all he does is occasionally do schoolwork, boot up a couple of Chrome tabs, and play Call of Duty every now and then. It's disgusting, truly disgusting that college kids, even when they're already in so much debt, are still being taken advantage of. Not just by car salesmen, because yes, car salesmen have been taking advantage of fresh graduates, both entering college and exiting college for years now, but now, even computer stores, phone stores, internet providers, and heck, even your freaking mattress. Yes, young 20-somethings are taking multi-year, multi-thousand, high-interest loans on furniture these days, all because it's got a specced out shiny tablet on it. Like, why you need a couch or fridge that do this? Like, I need a fridge with food in it, not a shiny toy on it. Good news though, when we revisited the store, I went with him, made it firm that his budget was $1,200 beginning to end, not for a down payment, a 100% that he can buy with that money. They said the only computer that fit his specs and also would fit that budget needed to be ordered, so we'd have to wait. Again, this is a strategy they do to make you impatient to buy something that's there, even if it's a couple hundred more, because then they immediately walked over to a $1,400 one and they go, "This one's here right now, available. You can just spend a couple hundred more. We get that you don't want the $3,800 anymore, but you can just spend $1,400, just $200 more, and you can have this one right now." Thankfully though, an actual moral human being, employee of the year, he wasn't actually the employee of the year, but this guy is the employee of the year in my heart because he's the real MVP. He restored my faith in salesmen. He walks by and sneaks in between the salesman that was talked to my friend earlier, and he comes up, pulls us aside and says, "Hey, we've actually got a higher spec model than the one that he just showed you for $1,400, and it's available right now too." And of course I raised my eyebrow like, "Dude, really? You're gonna upsell us even more than he did? I get that you guys are paid commission, but like really?" And he goes, No, it's okay. This one's an open box. So it used to be $1,500, but it was discounted because it's open box, and it was $1,200 after open box. Boom, within budget. And he's like, "If it has any problems, 90-day return, money back guarantee." However, 2 years later, that open box computer, whatever the heck specs it had, I think it was a 37i7 when it was like, and which back, this was during the GPU inflation, so it was actually like a really good computer to have for that price, honestly. Especially for a pre-build, like wow, holy crap, looking back, that was a pretty good price. It was the greatest deal that he got in some time, and in the end, he ended up winning. He spent within within his budget range and got what he needed with a little bit extra on top as a surprise. He could have still just ordered the other one and waited and would have still been satisfied, but it's good to know that this other salesman at least did obey the rules of stay within the budget. Like, that's cool. Yes, you know, it was an open box, and yes, those do have some scuffs on them, but hey, a little bit extra performance. Does he actually need it? No, not really, but it's within the budget, it's here now, so that suited his needs too. Doesn't need to wait, doesn't need to buy the 1400 one, and definitely doesn't need to buy the 3800 one. The moral of the story is that you shouldn't let fear of missing out on features you don't even need dictate you buying a more expensive computer, car, or even sofa. Yeah, y'all probably thought it was a joke when I started this video off saying sofa, but seriously, y'all wildin' out here. Why is this a problem? Especially the latter. I'm actually worried about people who finance multiple sofas, or even one sofa. I don't know about that, man, especially as a young 20-something. Super big disclaimer, if you do actually love these things, it's okay to spend more on them. But again, always understand your limits and understand the logic of why you're still making those decisions. For most average people, like most people, we're all mortal, right? We don't have unlimited time in this world. So the way I see it is we can't all be hobbyists for everything, and we can't all be the best at everything. I only have so much money I can make, and so do most people watching this video. I don't want to have the high-spec computer, the newest phone, or the fanciest sofa. I do love cars, so I'm gonna spend a bit more on cars, and I shouldn't feel guilty about it, and neither should you if you truly love them. But notice how I put a limit on myself for other things aside from cars, because that's the reality of life. I think people get caught up in the rat race, and especially get suckered into the spec sheet nerd life when they want the best of everything in every category. Don't be like that, and if you are like that, it's not too late to change, even if it feels like you took an L, like you might have put yourself a bit too far. As long as you learn to not do it again. Like I said, I want to humanize spec sheet nerds to some extent. You can still change. And